Hello and welcome, family, to another episode of Ask Dr. Mumbi. My name is Dr. Mumbi Seraki. Special shout out to our ancestors with the wind. Thank you so much for joining us. Special shout out to everyone who has subscribed to the channel, and of course to our Patreon family. We appreciate, love you so much. We really do. So, what's so interesting is there's a few people who have reached out to me asking me about the craziness of why Babylon took so many of our freedom fighters' heads. It's actually only when when Elizabeth passed on and I started to share the stories of what had happened to some of our Kenyan freedom fighters, that other people started to share how they took so many of the heads of our leaders. And a few of you were asking me what's behind that. Like, why were they so obsessed with, taking the heads of our leaders? What were they doing with these heads? And family, there's actually a brother who responded, and I'm telling you, it's so sick. I even want to just start off by reading his comments, but this is so disturbing because I told you, Babylon's narrative is magic. It was magic that they used. As our ancient, prophets and seers said, they cast a spell over Africa and then they moved in. The land of Ethiopia, the land of Kemet, the land of, the Bantu, the land of so many wonderful things, family. But they cast a spell, and they say the spell is a spell of sleep, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Have you seen those three monkeys? Who do you think the monkey is? Anyway, let me not even, get into that. So some of you guys were asking me, what is it? And someone called Unconquerable Roots. Thank you so much for sharing this in the comments. You can check out this show out. Actually, I did a show on who is William Samoei Ruto. Really, it's on my main channel. We're reviving the main channel to kind of cover the politics of southern Ethiopia, as we come back together in such a time as this. There's so much that I'm going to be sharing about what's happening in East Africa. And I hope our West African brothers and sisters will also tell us, on the ground, what's happening there. But Unconquerable Roots said, they're using, because I was talking about how Samoy, the freaking British, chopped off his head 117 years ago, and they went with the skull and it's in a museum. And so he said, they're using his head for this, and he quotes Jasher 31, and it says, and this is the manner of the images. In taking a man who is the firstborn and slaying him, and taking the hair off his head, and taking salt and salting the head and anointing it in oil, then taking a small tablet of copper or a tablet of gold and writing the name upon it, and placing the tablet under his tongue, and taking the head with the tablet under the tongue and putting it in the house and lighting up lights before it and bowing down to it. Now, family, try and understand the code of this, of what the Babylonians are actually revealing here. So there are certain rituals that they used to do with the heads of our ancestors. And it gets even more disturbing, where he says, and at the time when they bow, do it. It speaketh to them in all matters that they ask of it, through the power of the name which is written in it. And some make them in the figures of men of gold and silver. Do you get it? Let me just paraphrase. Some make the skulls in the figures of men of gold and silver and go to them in times known to them, meaning a secret hour, like the witching hour. And the figures receive the influence of the stars and tell them future things. And in this manner were the images which Rachel stole from her father. Now, there's a lot of gibberish and jabberish there, family. Definitely check out the comment in the show. I'll try and pin it actually on that show. Jasher, read it for yourself. Go into the book of Jasher and read it. I think that must be Apocrypha vibes. But family, did you get what they did? I mean, literally, that's a spell right there. I was just seeing it as a containment spell. But this is worse, where they would pick a certain time to go and speak to the head of one of our ancestors and have him reveal the secrets. And especially like now, when I was giving the example of Samoy, where he was a visionary, he was a spiritual leader as well as a political leader. Most, if not all, our African leaders had to be. Both spirit, there was not, it was, that's why royal priesthood, it's not a joke thing. But can you imagine that, family? I just want to look because I remember someone else left a comment. Yeah, he went on to say, yes, my sister, that's how Babylon rolls, using the head of our ancestors to rule ours in the past. It's now recompense time, Babylon. That's how he ended it. So they would literally make these, because they'd like trapped the spirit in the head, they would do this magic where the head would speak to them. I feel like there's a movie. There's a movie like this. And the spirit of our, I also felt that spirit of containment, where the great leaders, their spirit was contained in their heads all these years, family. But now that's broken because the book of life of Babylon, that time is over. We're closing it out. And as we close it out, it's not just about we close out that book, we release it, we move into a new one. No, we're releasing everything that got trapped during that book of life. All the spirits of our ancestors who were enslaved, who were colonized, who were beaten, who were tortured, we're putting all of that to rest now. Many of them returned for such a time as this, and they have been doing their personal healing of that. And that's why they say a lot of chosen ones, you're actually, your ancestors returned. So you've actually taken on that burden because you lived there. And so when you passed the last time, many things were not resolved. You were still bitter. You were still in pain. You were still angry. And by passing with that mindset, because death is nothing like what we think it is, family. It's like just passing through another door into another room. And your mindset is what will now determine what room you end up in. And many of our soul brothers and soul sisters were stuck in this perpetual return. Where literally, I don't know if you've heard these stories where they talk about how our energy is being harvested because death isn't real, family. And so when they take you through, by putting us in these death and birth rituals, people can't escape back into their cosmic worlds, back into their spiritual realms, but rather they're stuck on this thing of perpetual return because the mind has been hijacked. And the mind is the vehicle that you use to get in, to come here and to go back. And that's why it's been such a big deal for us to demand the heads back and make sure that it's not a clone or anything. And that's why for so long, because I bet by the time they give them back, it would even have been a fake one. But that's why for so long they didn't want to give it to us, because if we saw what they'd done, it would be like, what kind of wizardry and witchery is this? But family, the reason why Africa is where it's at is because people don't know their story. It's our story that they hid from us to keep us enslaved. They knew if they had us here, physically, we would submit to them because there's no way they could have conquered us physically. We outnumber them multiple times, and yet they're able to subjugate us. Why? Because they have controlled this and they've controlled the narrative. That's why I'm always going on and on and on about the narrative and about us starting to create our own narrative. If we really want to change Africa, it starts with the narrative, family. You can't change the politics if your people are still in the Babylon narrative, because then your politics can be hijacked anytime. They can easily just, spread propaganda through the human rights organizations, the NGOs, and topple your government. I mean, read the script of how so many of our revolutionary leaders have been taken out, as recent as Magufuli, family. Excuse the construction in the background. But family, it's so funny. Whenever it's an important message, there's always some kind of construction or a crow. And whenever the message is powerful, it's always the wind, the spirit of the ancestors. But the narrative is how they control us. That's why they don't want to give those heads back. But it's shocking how many of the heads they took that we know about. Imagine the ones that we didn't, because even the soldiers were taking personal souvenirs, fingers, what? Excuse me. But now all of that is done. That book of life is closed out. We are truly in a new dawn. And once we realize how important the narrative is, we'll be able to build a bridge for our people to cross over into the new earth. Because many people can't go into the new earth because they don't even know it's there. They don't know what's going on. So much has been kept from them that they don't know. They feel it. And for those of us who are blessed and highly favored to have ancestors and an expanded spiritual team, we've known it we've been prepared for such a time as this. But for those of our brothers and sisters who have been taken so far down that rabbit hole by Babylon, down the false matrix by Babylon, they need us as way showers, not to show them the way physically, but to start to create a new consciousness of what Africa is really about, what our people are really about. They always override us with their narrative because they control the narrative. So as long as we're speaking on their platforms, they'll always, but you'll see, before any great power rises, look at China, look at what's happening with India now. They always launch an international feel TV station. Even when the Middle East was coming up, when they came up with Al Jazeera, although Qatar and Dubai, they all fell out, and Saudi, whatever. Those are long stories for them. But when we know that Africa is really changing is when we start to see one of our continental stations, and this is a prophecy, family. When we see one of our continental nations, from whatever country, from wherever, starting to have a dominant place, the way like CNN and BBC and all these, because now the Indians now default to WION, World is One Network. And they've given it that international feel. They even hired a Kenyan journalist and many others. But the day that we create that and you see that and there's an Africa 24 or whatever it's going to be called, that's when you know. Because it's all about the narrative. We want to thank every single person that supports us to continue to bring the important narrative to our people. Thank you so much to everyone that supports us on Patreon. We appreciate, love you so much. Thanks for everyone who sends us donations through PayPal. Until next time, tuko pamoja.